The story was reported in the right-wing New York Post before the 2020 election. It went like this. It was 2019 and Joe Biden was soon to run against Donald Trump for the presidency. Hunter Biden went into a computer repair shop. He wanted to recover data from some broken laptop computers, but he never returned to pick them up. Eventually, the computer repairman, John Paul McIsaac, looked at what was on the laptops, as he says he was allowed to, under a so-called 90-day abandonment procedure. What did the computer repairman find? Well, quite a lot. Homemade pornography, embarrassing photos. But it was the email traffic that turned this into a more serious matter. Hunter Biden used to be on the board of a Ukrainian energy company called Burisma. And John Paul McIsaac claims the laptop contained evidence that Hunter Biden used his connection with his father to help in this role, something that would amount to corruption. One email from a consultant to the firm read, "Dear Hunter, thank you for inviting me to DC and giving an opportunity to meet your father and spend some time together."
The announcement of my guy's upcoming travels. Now, my guy, Hunter refers to his father as my guy or the chairman or the big guy.
Joe Biden says he's never discussed his son's overseas dealings with him. He's dismissed the whole story as Russian disinformation. McIsaac, the computer repairman, who says he voted for Donald Trump in the 2016 election, made a copy of the laptop's contents and then told the FBI in December 2019. The story eventually made its way to the New York Post.
Boy.
It was seized upon by Mr. Trump and his supporters, but it didn't make the impact that might have been expected. The FBI made clear their concerns about Russian disinformation ahead of the 2020 election. Subsequently, Facebook and Twitter restricted the spread of the laptop story on their platforms. Joe Biden won the 2020 election. The laptop story wasn't given the scale of coverage that might have been expected.
In the final weeks of the 2020 presidential campaign, the New York Post reported on the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop, alleging he used his father's position for personal gain, a claim the president's son has denied. Less than a week later, more than 50 former intelligence officials released a statement that the laptop had all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation.
About laptop from hell.
At the final presidential debate, then-candidate Biden cited the letter from intel officials to push back against then-President Trump's attacks.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plan. They have said that this has all the 5 former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage.
According to a letter released Thursday night from the Republican chairman of the House Judiciary and Intelligence Committees, former CIA Deputy Director Michael Morell told congressional investigators that days after the laptop story, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, then a Biden campaign advisor, reached out to Morell and set in motion the events that led to the intelligence officials' public statement.
If they made an effort to manipulate intelligence officials to sign a letter, basically misleading the public about the Hunter Biden laptop right before the election, that is a major, major political event.
Incriminating evidence allegedly found on a laptop belonging to Biden.
Some sort of Russian disinformation campaign.
It's a lie.
Altered or fake, unverified emails.
The story did not quite land due to the lack of verification.
Listen,
Can't be verified.
What can't be verified?
The laptop.
Why do you say that?
Well, because it can't be verified.
I don't even want to report this. This is one of the most powerful families in Washington.
Liz, I'm a journalist.
Okay, I would love if you guys would start doing that verification.
No, we're not going to do your work for you.
It's a journalist's
Contrary.
job.
Not anymore.
For all we know, these emails are made up.
Not really stories, just pure distractions. No serious journalist should fall for it.
It's a journalist's job to find out if this is verified.
The bottom line is we cannot confirm the story.
Experts say the emails cannot be authenticated.
The mainstream media is not reporting on this story because we can't authenticate this material.
The Hunter Biden laptop material is genuine.
This is a classic example of the right-wing media machine.
It just lacks credibility. The fact that it appeared in the New York Post,
the only place low enough to put this orphan bastard story in print.
Obvious disinformation.
It is so obviously a Russian operation.
So obviously disinformation.
So obviously a Russian plot. Tell me why it's so obviously a Russian plot to you.
This is just classic textbook Soviet-Russian tradecraft at work.
Right, exactly. And this is classic, very classic Russian disinformation tactic.
Your classic
a disinformation campaign.
We shouldn't look at it as anything other than a Russian disinformation operation.
Known Kremlin disinformation.
Russians would be my number one guess.
Obviously, Russia.
Russian disinformation operation.
Russian disinformation.
Pushing Russian disinformation.
It does bear the hallmarks of Russian disinformation.
Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinfo.
Hunter Biden's laptop looks like it's tied to Vladimir Putin in Moscow.
Is that laptop yours?
I don't know. I truly...
You don't know?
The serious answer is that I truly do not know the answer to that.
Did you leave a laptop with a repairman in Wilmington? Not that you remember?
No. I truly don't know.
Are you missing a laptop?
Not that I know of.
What?
This whole operation looks right out of the Kremlin playbook.
The playbook of Russian disinformation.
Russian disinformation put into the haystack.
Russian disinfo.
Sounds like bullshit. I mean, who takes a laptop with their most personal information, drops it off, and never comes back for it?
You read the book and you'll realize that I wasn't keeping tabs on possessions very well for about a 4-year period of time.
A Russian disinformation campaign.
Disinformation from the Russians. Putin is trying very hard to spread disinformation about Joe Biden.
The Biden campaign says this is Russian disinformation.
There's overwhelming evidence that the Russians are engaged. It's a Russian plan.
Russian disinformation.
Nobody believes it except his and his good friend Rudy Giuliani.
So could have been yours.
Of course, certainly.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
History will expose you all as fools and useful idiots for the Russians.
One eternity later.
Biden emails finally authenticated according to the New York Times.
And this is apparently the position of the CIA. There's a congressional report out, House Judiciary just released it, that the CIA interfered in the 2020 election. In other news, dogs bark, fish swim, birds fly. Yeah, I'm grateful to the Congress and House Judiciary for releasing this. I'm very grateful. I don't mean to be glib about it, because you know that the libs are going to keep lying to us and say, no, the CIA, the intelligence community, didn't interfere in the election. So it's very important, actually, that an authoritative body like a congressional committee can go out and say, no, here's the report, here are the facts, the CIA did interfere, because that confirms for us something that we already knew. I mean, I guess that's why I'm kind of laughing about it, is we already knew the CIA and the intelligence community interfered in 2020. Why? Because they released that long letter. They released a letter signed by 51 ex-spies in 2020 saying that the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation. The Hunter Biden laptop story, which we now know the federal government has admitted was totally legit. The Hunter Biden laptop was real. It did include evidence of lots of crimes, some of which, the least of which, Hunter Biden is now being prosecuted for. The Hunter Biden laptop story comes out. The intelligence community with all these ex-spies come out, they say it's fake news, Russian disinformation. The big social media platforms then, under pressure from the intelligence community, limit the reach of that story, the public reach and the private reach. They prevent people, in some cases, from even privately messaging the story. Joe Biden then cites that story during the presidential debate with Trump to push the story out of the news. The story, which after the 2020 election, a poll was conducted that showed that 12% of Biden voters would have not voted for Biden had they known that the Hunter Biden laptop story was real or had they heard about it at all. So is that it? Is that all there is to it? Well, some ex-spies signed a letter. That's not the fault of the intelligence community necessarily, even though the IC did put some pressure on the big tech companies. Well, that's not it, right? No. Well, what Congress has uncovered is that high-ranking CIA officials, up to and including then CIA Director Gina Haspel, were aware of the Hunter Biden laptop statement prior to its approval. Why? Because when spies want to go around mouthing off to the press, they need to go through something called the Pre-Publication Classification Review Board, the PCRB, which then sends this statement to the CIA's then Chief Operating Officer, Andrew McCridis, who then informed the then Director of the CIA, Haspel, or then Deputy Director Vaughn Frederick Bishop, that the statement would soon be published. The CIA leadership, the active CIA leadership at the very top, had the opportunity to slow this down because it was fake news and it was obviously agency interference in the political process, but they didn't do that. They didn't do that at all. And by not doing that, the CIA, the active CIA, co-signed it. Furthermore, some of the ex-spies on the list weren't just ex-spies, like Michael Morell, who was on active contract with the CIA at the time that he signed that letter. And after that letter came out, we now know for a fact CIA employees internally expressed concern that this would compromise the agency, that this was an improper interference by the CIA into the political process. and that it would not be, quote, helpful to the agency in the long run. Okay.
So we all remember that letter Politico published ahead of the 2020 election that dismissed the Hunter laptop story as Russian disinfo. The letter was crafted right after the New York Post had published a piece on the laptop, which Hunter had dropped off at a computer repair shop and then abandoned it. The hard drive contained tons of stuff concerning Biden's business dealings, as well as all sorts of sordid, or in Kat's view, romantic, videos of Hunter doing drugs and hookers. But then miraculously, this letter signed by 50-odd Intel experts appeared to save Joe's day, and boy, did it. The story was blacklisted by major media outlets and social media algorithms. If you even mentioned it, you were mocked, scorned, or suspended from tech platforms. The rest is history. Trump lost, and now we have this.
You know, thank you for joining us as well. And for families across the country, you know, this.
Venn diagram? Venn diagram. I love Venn diagrams. I really love Venn diagrams. You know, the circles, right? Oh my gosh. 3 usually.
Since then, of course, the laptop story and the New York Post have been vindicated. But we had to wonder, how did that letter come about? Why were so-called Intel experts so happy to dismiss something they didn't bother to investigate? Well, last night, Bret Baier, the host of Special Report, actually had one of the letter endorsers on his show, a former CIA officer.
October, days before the 2020 election, you signed on to this open letter that was published by Politico. It said, "We write to say that the arrival on the U.S. political scene of emails purportedly belonging to Vice President Biden's son, Hunter, much of it related to his time serving on the board of the Ukrainian gas company Burisma, has all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation."
Right.
Why did you sign on to that?
Yeah, because of what it says. It has all the classic earmarks of one of these operations. You'll note elsewhere in the letter, if you read it, that it also says we don't know if this is a Russian operation at all.
So get this. It had all the classic earmarks, but it's not like we said it's real because we don't know, right? Okay, since when do 50 members of intelligence suddenly put out an urgent letter saying we don't know? When does that ever happen? Sorry, dude, 50 people don't do anything urgently if they have misgivings. Otherwise, when people aren't sure or they're ambivalent, what's the rush? Where's the fire? You do nothing. Baier points out that even though the agent claimed they didn't know, Biden still used it exactly the way the agents had intended.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plant.
You mean the laptop is now another Russia hoax?
That's exactly what.
Is this where you
exactly what.
This is where he. So, understanding how you characterize it, but he characterized it differently and used it in a debate just days before an election.
Yeah, I'll let President Biden speak for himself. He's capable of doing.
Joe only speaks if you feed him the words, like you did in this phony letter. But my favorite part is this.
People who study Russian disinformation, intelligence officers who look at Russian tactics over the long period of time, this is the kind of thing they like to amplify to sow discord within target countries.
You get that? It's Russian disinformation, even though the information is true, because they amplify it.
It has all the classic earmarks of a Russian campaign. It has all the classic earmarks. This has all the classic earmarks of a Russian information campaign. It has all the classic earmarks of a Russian information campaign.
Then he blames the media and anyone else he can find.
In the way it was disseminated and propagated through media.
Even though it wasn't true. It had the classic earmarks, but it wasn't true.
What is not true?
That it was Russian disinformation.
That's not what we said in the letter. Read the actual letter, and we said we do not know if this is Russian disinformation.
It has all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation.
Exactly. The difference between an information campaign and a disinformation campaign
not get to candidate
and a misinformation campaign. It's not my fault if people don't look up definitions.
So it's our fault that we don't know the difference. Do you believe this guy once worked for an outfit that has the word intelligence in it? And I'll agree with him about the media. They ran with this letter, but not the laptop, like it was the truth, despite the laptop having endless videos of Hunter Biden's butt and other things. But that's exactly what they were expected to do once a letter like this from 50 experts gave them the cover they needed. It gets worse.
He said it plainly on a debate stage that obviously affected the dynamic.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
I would absolutely love for all news media to show nuance on all these issues instead of racing to sound bites.
Dude, there were no sound bites. The facts were taken from the letter you co-wrote, which again, was the plan all along. No one writes a letter to be ignored. So this is just a glimpse of who was involved in this fraud. Now multiply this dimwit by 50. The ends justify the means. You can lie to the American people and there's no consequences. Because every single signer of that letter needs to be questioned just like that. Like, who asked them to do this? Were they paid? Did they deduct that contribution from their taxes? But I credit this guy for at least showing his face in public.
So there are a number of issues that Americans need clarity on regarding the FBI. The first one is Hunter Biden. Why? Because Hunter Biden is tied in with his father, the president of the United States, and there are accusations, and they have evidence to back some of them up, that Joe Biden, as vice president, helped his son and Joe Biden's brother amass millions of dollars from foreign nations. That's a serious situation. The FBI is the lead investigative agency. Okay? Now, there's been a grand jury for more than 2 years in Delaware looking into this matter. We don't have any clarity at all. All we know is that the press, the corrupt corporate media, tried to hide the evidence by saying that the laptop Hunter Biden inexplicably left in a pawn shop was fake. And then the embarrassment of a bunch of civil servants signing a paper saying that it was Russian disinformation. It was ridiculous. Now, that's a serious story because it casts an aspersion on the FBI. Can you adjudicate this case?
How many people are getting newspapers on paper? Not many.
People with birds.
Perhaps. But the point is, and if we look at the Biden laptop case, where what you had was a newspaper reporting a story that then lost its account on Twitter because it wanted that story to be visible. In other words,
who lost their account on Twitter?
The New York Post.
Okay.
So Twitter silenced the New York Post in the run-up to the last election on the basis that the Hunter Biden laptop story appeared to be Russian disinformation, which of course it wasn't. Mm-hmm. And that, that's basically some kind of election interference. Is it, ballot box stuffing? No, but it's interference in the election that comes not at is the newspaper able to report the story, but is the newspaper able to alert people that it's reported the story because nobody's getting the New York Post on paper.
And over and over and over again, we're faced with this. Obvious once you've heard it, but still hard to remember in the moment. The new tactics will not look like the old tactics. If you know what has been done before sufficiently that probably all of your neighbors do too, and that's what you're looking for as evidence that there is skullduggery about, you won't find it because it wouldn't work.
But, that's sort of the underlying theme of a lot of what the Twitter file stuff is. It's just this collaboration between a relatively tightly knit group of insiders who have decided that they're going to do this thing kind of together and without the input of the public, I guess,
And on that note, we have new revelations in something that you covered via the Twitter files, which is the whole scam about dismissing and censoring reporting about the leaks from Hunter Biden's laptop as a Russian propaganda operation. You revealed via the Twitter files that Twitter acted very quickly to censor this despite there being no evidence for it. And the basis for all these claims was a group of former intelligence officials writing a letter saying that, in their judgment, that the Hunter Biden laptop has all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. They also acknowledged they had no evidence, but that part of their letter was ignored. And Twitter had been basically primed for this after being warned by the FBI that some sort of hack and leak operation was going to come. And so finally, when the Hunter Biden laptop appeared, Twitter, having been prepared for this by the FBI, just assumed it came from Russia and censored it accordingly. Now we've got new revelations that not only was this whole claim about the Hunter Biden laptop a scam, but actually the idea originated with the Biden campaign. There was the Biden campaign that actually triggered this statement from these former intelligence officials. And this came via an admission from Mike Morrell, the former deputy director of the CIA. You've written now 2 articles about this admission by Morrell. And you've pointed out that not only has the media failed to acknowledge Morrell's disclosure, but also there's been, just no reckoning with the fact that people like Morrell dominate the media now. They're paid contributors. So talk to us, Matt, about Morrell's admission and the complete censorship of it so far, much like the Hunter Biden laptop story was censored based on the statement from Morrell and his intelligence friends.
Right. And I know there are a lot of people out there, and Aaron, I'm sure you've encountered this too. There are people who roll their eyes as soon as they hear Hunter Biden laptop story, right? Like, oh, who cares about the Hunter Biden laptop story? And I can kind of understand that, right? Like the story as it came out in the New York Post that year, there wasn't a whole lot of proof of definite corruption in there. not yet anyway, right? Like it was suggestive of all kinds of things. It was damaging. It was derogatory. But you can see that the Republicans, were primed to make a much bigger deal out of it than there was in the New York Post. But that's not the importance of that story. The importance of it was really twofold. I mean, the first one was the blocking of it, which was unprecedented. I mean, it's weeks out from a presidential election, and it gets stopped by Facebook and Twitter. Twitter, kind of amazingly, and this is something that we didn't find in the Twitter files, but I just got from somebody at Twitter. They even employed this tool to prevent people from exchanging it via DMs, which is something they only used for like child porn. So they used the most extreme tools they had to lock down this story. Now, that only lasted for a little bit, but still, in American history, there's never been a story like this. I mean, I guess you could go back to the Pentagon Papers when the Nixon administration tried to argue prior restraint. That was the government doing it. This is private companies. But still, once you start looking at all the actors involved, it was a huge censorship story, I think. And it was important on those grounds. Now, because of this new stuff that's come out via the Weaponization of Government Committee, I mean, it's not clear because we haven't seen the whole testimony of Michael Morell yet, who, again, he was the former acting head of the CIA. He was going to be Hillary's CIA director. Very interesting character because he also played a big role in Russiagate.
Yep.
Aaron, as you know, like
in August 2016, he wrote an op-ed in the New York Times saying, very similar to the Hunter Biden letter, saying that based on my experience as an intelligence officer, I suspect that Putin may have recruited Trump as a unwitting asset of the Russian government. Really, this is the exact same playbook in 2016 as he organized in 2020.
Right, and so we have to wonder, in light of this. Well, let's go to what happened in the Hunter Biden episode. So now it's come out, Jim Jordan's committee, and again, people are rolling their eyes at Jim Jordan's name. I understand that, but he questioned Morell. Morell says he wouldn't have organized this letter by 50 former intelligence officials, including 5 former heads of the CIA. He wouldn't have done that absent a call from Anthony Blinken, who at the time was a senior advisor to the Biden campaign. So the picture of a pretty damning looking scandal is already there. We don't know exactly what the specifics are, but it sounds like the request to do this letter might have come from the Biden administration. Now, why is that bad? Because it was a lie. They were engineering basically a diversionary tactic with the aid of the intelligence community that was then acted upon by all of these complicit journalists who went and they even went further in their use of language than the actual intelligence officers did by calling it, Russian disinfo, which is, they didn't use that term, the intel officers. But I hate to use this overblown comparison, but Watergate was a massive scandal over stuff like the Canuck letter, where they were sending a phony letter to the Manchester Union leader that suggested candidate Ed Muskie was prejudiced against French Canadians. This is a much huger scale media deception that they were engineering. I don't know. I don't understand the lack of interest in the story. I mean,
well, again, it's the same thing because they're complicit in it. Everybody bought this narrative that this Hunter Biden laptop story just came from Russia, and accordingly, either cheered on the censorship by social media companies or just ignored it. And of course, this was being done because this was in the interest of the Biden campaign. And, most people in media wanted Biden to win. And, that's why Glenn Greenwald had to leave The Intercept, is because when he was trying to report on this, they wouldn't let him. So he had to resign over it. But look, let's go back to see how the Biden campaign used this. This is a clip from a debate in October 2020, just a week or two before the election. And look at how Biden invoked this letter that his own campaign helped inspire, which, of course, he didn't tell us at the time, to dismiss the Hunter Biden laptop story.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plant. They have said that this has all the 5 former heads of the CIA, both parties say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage. Nobody believes it except his and his good friend Rudy Giuliani.
You mean the laptop is now another Russia hoax?
That's exactly what.
Is this
that's
where you're
exactly
going?
what.
This is
told.
where he's going. The laptop is Russia.
Gentlemen, I want to stay on the issue of race.
You
okay?
have to be kidding. Here we
Mr.
go
President?
again with Russia.
What Biden didn't tell us, and maybe he didn't know, for all we know, was that, it was his own campaign official and now Secretary of State Blinken who had spearheaded all this by calling up Mike Morrell and sharing with him an article in USA Today that said the FBI was looking into this laptop thing as a smoke bomb of Russian disinformation. And by the way, in one of the emails Blinken sent to Morrell, there was a signature of a senior member of Biden's communications team, showing that obviously the Biden team wanted this to get to Morrell and wanted this out there. And now Democrats in response have said that there was another part of Morrell's testimony which Republicans didn't highlight, which is when they asked him, they said, did Blinken ask you or insinuate that he wanted you to write this statement? And Morrell said, no, he did not. He said, no, to my memory.
My memory, yeah.
So he invoked his memory at least twice, which is interesting. So he's allowing some space there for his answer to be wrong by saying my memory, does not recall. But let's assume his memory is correct. You don't need someone to make a direct ask of you to know what they want. I mean, if you're a seasoned operative in Washington, if someone calls you and says, hey, check out this, there's this thing about Hunter's laptop, it could be from Russia. And, it's pretty clear what is being asked of you. And that's why Morrell also testified, and Democrats ignore this, that after that debate, after Biden cited that statement in the debate, a senior official in the Biden campaign, that I believe the chairman, called up Morrell and thanked him for the statement. And the Biden campaign even strategized on disseminating the statement and which specific reporters it would go to. The Biden campaign wanted it to go to someone in the Washington Post. Ultimately, it went to the Politico. So the idea that the Biden campaign had nothing to do with it.
And that reporter, by the way, was one of the reporters who was at the tabletop exercise.
For Politico or for the Washington Post?
The Post, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so the tabletop exercise, and that's just to remind people, that is basically when Twitter was being prepared for the possibility that there'd be some sort of hack and leak operation, and so this then gives them this primes them for when the Hunter Biden laptop story actually drops. And actually, the tabletop exercise even entailed Hunter Biden, right? It was even
it was Hunter Biden and Burisma. Yeah,
and it's organized by it's held by the
Aspens.
And the FBI is involved. Yeah. And by the way, speaking of playbooks, so not only do you have these former intelligence officials, invoking their experience to say this comes from Russia, much as Morrell did in 2016 to say that he invoked his experience to say that Trump is a Russian asset, but also it's the same playbook where the campaign has a key role in getting this out there. And then once it gets released, they point to this as if it's independent evidence and they hide the fact they had a role in it, much like the Clinton campaign did this with the Steele dossier and also the Alpha Bank scam. Remember that when the Alpha Bank story finally appeared? And even though privately their own contractor, Fusion GPS, was like pushing this to media outlets, when it appeared,
they were generating it.
They're generating. Jake Sullivan and Hillary Clinton came out and said, "Look at this story about Trump's secret communications with the Russian bank. It's the exact same playbook."
It's over and over. They're doing the same thing. They're generating the news. They're laundering it through some other agency or organization, which then becomes the source for it. And then when it comes out, they say, "Oh, we're shocked. Look at this. This is an outrage." And look, at the very least, it's a lie. The Clinton administration, with the Clinton, when we learned that there was a senior Trump official who had these links to Russia, that after Michael Isikoff's story, for instance, they didn't learn it; they knew it. They created that story. I think the tripping point for some people is this illegal? No, maybe not. I don't know. I think you'd have to come up with a new type of legal theory for this kind of thing. But what do you call all these actors working in concert to engineer a massive deception in the middle of a campaign season? It's certainly corrupt, I think. But is it a crime? I don't know. But
it's the exact same thing they're accusing Russia of, which is malign interference in an election, spreading lies to impact the outcome. And in this case, not just spreading lies, but spreading lies that enable censorship of factual reporting.
I think so many people, honestly, some people believed it, but then I think other people, when confronted with it, were just like, who cares? The priority is defeating Trump. Or they'd say, who cares but Trump? Like, you want to talk about corruption, but Trump. That was something that we saw a lot of.
But look what happened. Because many people adopted that attitude, that gave these same intelligence officials and their allies a free pass to deploy that same playbook against Bernie Sanders in 2020, when they leaked claims that Putin was trying to elect him, and that was used to undermine Bernie. So yes, even if you're purely looking at this from a partisan angle and your political interest, at least if you're a progressive, that means you're supporting something that will be used to undermine you, as what happened.
Yeah, and I also think, once you start going down the road of saying it's okay to do this, or it's okay for us to turn the other way over something, a colossal media lie and an act of censorship because Trump is bad, then where does it end? Not only are you morally going to be stuck going down that road forever, but also the administration owns you from that point forward. Once you've been complicit in something like that, what are you going to do? Push back on them afterward? There's not going to be a real, real press coverage of that administration going forward. So I don't know. I keep thinking about this story, and you've seen All the President's Men, I'm sure, right? Both of you. There's that's amazing scene where Bob Woodward is in the courtroom for the arraignment of the Watergate burglars, and they get to the judge asking James McCord what he does for a living, and he kind of whispers, Central Intelligence Agency, and Bob Woodward goes, "Holy shit!" Right? Like his eyes light up. Bob Woodward was a Republican. He would have voted for Nixon that year, but the reporter in him, in that scene at least, and who knows what happened in real life, was so jazzed by the scale of that story that it overwhelmed all the political considerations. Those things didn't matter at that point. That's what's puzzling to me about stuff like this. Like, where's the normal kind of reportorial excitement about this big thing? Because isn't it? I mean, it feels to me like a pretty big story. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something.
So I guess the last thing they can try to do, other than banish Trump to St. Helena, is to cut off all the sources of information to conservatives and to people in the middle and even people on the center left. It worked with the Hunter Biden laptop story. After the big tech colluded to shut down the Hunter Biden laptop story, all of a sudden, Joe Biden, I guess, wins the election. And then there's a poll conducted afterwards, which shows that 12% of Biden voters said, had they known about the Hunter Biden laptop story and seen all the crimes that the Biden family appears to have committed, they would not have voted for Biden. So the big tech censorship worked. They want to do it again. We need political action to stop it. The survival of the Daily Wire perhaps depends on this. The survival of conservative media perhaps depends on this. But even beyond any of these businesses, the survival of a free public square of the American political order depends on this. Great work from the Judiciary Committee. And I look forward to seeing our big tech overlords raked over the coals. And I really hope that something actually is done to stop them from doing what they're doing.
Was that your laptop?
For real, I don't know.
I know, but you know
point
that's
is,
this
I
is
really don't know.
Okay.
The answer is
You don't know
truthful
yes
answer.
or no if the laptop
I don't have
was
any
yours.
idea. I have no idea.
So
whether or
could
not.
have been yours.
Of course, certainly. There could be a laptop out there that was stolen from me. There could be that I was hacked. It could be that it was Russian intelligence.